What have we learned so far this year about the Springboks, the All Blacks and the Wallabies? I did this the other week for England and Ireland at the end of their summer tours, at the end of their seasons, and I thought now would be a good opportunity to have a chat about some of the Southern Hemisphere teams in all of this and where they are so far, look at some of the positives and also look at maybe some of the negatives, some of the areas that these teams need to improve. I'll go through them one by one. You can have your say in the comments, and whilst you're here, like the video, and if you haven't already, I would love it if you subscribe to the channel. Just hit that subscribe button. Overall, kind of top line for all three of these teams, it's been a good start to the year, hasn't it? I mean, we've got 2 Test Series victories for Australia and New Zealand. We've got a drawn series for South Africa, but it's against Ireland. I don't think there's any shame in that, really. 2 very, very good sides, a fiercely competitive, top level Test Series. And I think overall, all of these sides are in good positions, but they all have room to improve as well. One question for all of you, actually. Out of the 3 of them, who do you think would be the happiest right here, right now? I think that's quite an interesting way to look at it. There was part of me that wondered whether it would be Australia, just because expectations for the All Blacks and South Africa would be higher, whereas Australia are starting from such a low base from what we saw at the World Cup last year that actually maybe just getting those wins on the board might mean they might be the happiest at this moment in time. I'm not saying they're the best or better, they're clearly the weakest of the 3 teams. But anyway, you can let me know, I'll get on to Australia in a second. Let's start with the Springboks. I mean, there's a lot of positives so far for South Africa, but there are some things that they probably need to focus on. And I think the top of that really is the attack. And has the attack dropped off from perhaps where they got it to when they're at their very best in 2023. You look at that series against Ireland, and it's hard to gauge because Ireland are, as I mentioned, one of the best teams in the world, arguably the best team, probably the best team in the Northern Hemisphere. But I just wonder whether the attack for South Africa isn't quite where it was. And I know they've got players missing, they've had injuries to contend with, they've had players dropping out. But even in that series against Ireland, they scored a great try in the first test, and then almost opportunism from Cheslin Kolbe, which was brilliant, by the way, when James Lowe tapped it back in field. But what I mean by that is it wasn't from structured attacking play, phase after phase, looking at the attacking shape. And then, of course, in the second test, they were relying on the boot of Andre Pollard, which is a massive weapon. But again, it just made me wonder where their attack is at the moment and whether that is an area that I think perhaps they need to improve and get better at. And I think it will be a focus of the coaches as we look ahead to the Rugby Championship. But overall, I say loads of positives, I think, for the Springboks. In particular, some of the new blood that has come into the team, which is even more impressive given the fact that they pretty much treated the Ireland series as like their first team, pretty much. As I say, they had some injuries, so we did see some players come in. But I think in particular, Sasha Feinberg-Umgonzulu has looked brilliant in the Test matches we've seen him take part in so far. And Edwill van der Merwe as well. Let's not forget about him. He got injured, so we couldn't really see him against Ireland, but he was very, very good and player of the match against Wales. And there's another player I think I would love to see more of in that Springbok setup. What I've seen from him is really exciting. Feinberg-Umgonzulu is going to be the main one, though, isn't he? Where does he fit into the scheme of things now? I've seen some people say that he's almost the boot of Pollard and the attacking play of Libbok. He's like a hybrid of the two and therefore should be the player that starts and that they invest the most time in to get up to Test level and run this team. I mean, he already looks like he's at Test level, to be completely frank. Every so often you just get those players, don't you? It doesn't matter that they're uncapped. They come in at international level and they look at home. He looks like he could be that guy. But who else as well? Because we have seen a lot of other new players for the Boks this year. I know we saw plenty against Portugal in the game this weekend. Anyone else in particular in the forwards that have really impressed you? Because as good as this Springbok team is, a number of those players by the next World Cup might not be there anymore in terms of the age profile of the side. Really experienced side, slightly older. So some of the newer players coming in the forwards, anyone in particular that has impressed you? Scrum half growth, I think, is one that is an area to maybe keep an eye on. And we've seen Faf, Cobus Reinert, Grant Williams has been in the team. Are we going to get to the point soon where Grant Williams is the starting 9 if we're looking towards the future? Do you stick with Faf for the time being. I think that's quite a key position that I'll certainly be keeping an eye on. But a lot of positives, and probably the biggest one overall is that old weapon. It is absolutely lethal, but is the scrum and is the front row. Because again, I think they've looked very, very good. It was a good competitive series in that regard against Ireland, but I'd still just think when you've got that as an attacking weapon in the way that the Springboks do, it is always going to give you a platform. It is always going to give you a way to get yourselves into games or dominate games. So I'll leave the Springboks there. Let's get on to the All Blacks. 2 from 2, well, 3 from 3 now. 2 from 2 in terms of the Test series against England. Victory against Fiji this weekend. Happy days, is it? Where are you with this, All Blacks fans? It's an interesting one because I saw loads of comments after the England series that would, to paraphrase, but they're along the lines of All Blacks need to be way better. It's a bit of a missed opportunity for England. All Blacks haven't quite been good enough. They've got away with it. They've had the experience of, say, a Bowden Barrett coming off the bench and been able to get their victories, but they've got to improve, which brings me on to the question, I suppose, of where. Because it is early days, new coach, new captain. I feel like I mention that in literally every video I do about the All Blacks, but you can't ignore it at the moment. It is a team at the start of their journey. So therefore, the fact that they are 3 from 3, surely you've got to be pretty delighted with it. But where could they improve? Because I think their scrum was good again. They put England under pressure at the scrum in both Test matches. That was a real key aspect of their game in their run to the World Cup final, was the improvement in the front 5. In terms of the scrum, that looked good. Their breakdown work is exceptional. Like when this New Zealand team are on their game, I think they are arguably better at the breakdown than any other team in the world. You look at like their really great victories. I look at that one, the victory against Ireland in the World Cup in that quarter-final. They were a menace at the breakdown for Ireland. And they caused England a lot of problems as well in the series we saw this summer. So I think that was good. Their attacking work, what do you make of where they are in attack? Again, we've seen some good stuff, in particular against Fiji, who aren't quite at the level of England. But I think Damien McKenzie at 10, growing into that position at fly half, we all know how good he is. And what about some of the players coming through? I mentioned it for the Springboks, but if I look at the All Blacks, Billy Proctor at 13, I know Anton Leonard-Brown isn't a new player, but was very good against Fiji as well. But Proctor, how much of a run in the team should he be given in terms of the centres and that midfield partnership? And then Cortez Ratimer at 9, went off injured against Fiji, didn't he? So I really hope he's not too bad. But I like the look of him at 9. In fact, I look at scrum half of the All Blacks, and with Aaron Smith obviously no longer being there. But Cortez Ratimer, I like the look of. And I just wonder, the name completely escapes me now, I've had an absolute mind blank, but the 9, Cam Roygaard, if he comes back fit, missing at the moment, you've got a couple of 9s there that could be pretty tasty moving forward. In terms of where does this team need to get better then, to go back to my original question, I've looked at the positives so far. The line-out is an obvious one. That was also better against Fiji, but it was a mess against England. It massively helped England stay in contention in those games and get themselves into the lead. So the line-out has to be a lot better. Where else are you looking at it? Maybe the attack, actually, to go back to that point. I know we've seen them do some good stuff, but they were troubled by England's blitz defence. I know they worked it to the edge on a couple of occasions because they had the skill to do it, but we saw balls going down in the midfield, passes not going to hand in the face of that blitz defence. You know that the Boks are likely going to bring that type of defensive work when they face off in the Rugby Championship. So is that an area that you feel this New Zealand team at this moment in time needs to be better at? Yeah, let me know, All Blacks fans. Let's finish off with the Wallabies. So wins to start the year. I know it's against Wales. Wales are in a mess at the moment. In fact, there were 2 teams, weren't they, in that series that weren't in a great place, but Australia got the victory on home soil. I don't think you can underestimate the fact of how important making a winning start to the year was for Australia. I was in Lyon for that game in the World Cup where they lost, 46? They lost to Wales, got absolutely blown away in the second half, knocked out of the World Cup, their worst ever World Cup performance, at a just incredibly low ebb for this Australian team and for rugby in Australia. So winning was so important. It doesn't matter that it was against Wales. They got 2 wins on the board. It gives them something to build upon. There will be tough tests to come later this year. They will have a tough time against the Boks and against the All Blacks when it comes to the Rugby Championship. We know that, but I think winning was so important. And they've scored some great tries. I mean, what have we learnt about Australia? If we're looking at the title of this video, that Tom Wright try or set-up try in the first test, the Daugunu try in the second test where Kellaway chips it from his own line, taps it down to Fraser McWright, who then passes to Daugunu. It's been a reminder of some of the quality in this Wallabies team. It is a rough diamond, I think. Can Joe Schmidt polish it into something which has a bit more substance, which has a bit more quality, and is able to drag themselves back up the world rankings? But those are two sensational tries. There's been moments and green shoots for Australia. We know they've got some great athletes, but can they be moulded into some sort of a team? And on that note, maul defence. If you're looking at the big area of weakness I think we've seen so far from Australia, an area where Wales had a lot of success against them, it was their maul defence. Maul tries that Wales were able to score, credit to them. There's two sides to any discussion like this. Wales were very good in that area, but I think from a Wallabies point of view, that's an area that you can improve a lot. And I mentioned him just now, actually, if we're looking at individual players, Fraser McWright, I think, is growing into his own as an international back row, isn't he? You look at him and Valentini and some of the other options in that back row, you like the sort of mix they have there. In fact, all over the Wallabies team, for the most part, I think there's some real potential there. The question, as I say, is are they able to kick on? And do they have the front row stocks in terms of depth to be able to compete with the best? But overall for Australia, it's an encouraging start to the year. It is going to get tougher. Can they continue to improve? And how quickly can they improve? I'm often reminded at the moment as an England fan that England, like, what would it have been, 5 games ago, after losing to Scotland in the Six Nations, we were all wondering where on earth they were going. And then they've beaten Ireland, they lost narrowly to France, they've beaten Japan, and they've had 2 narrow defeats away to New Zealand, and all of a sudden they're viewed as a completely different team. And they are a completely different team in terms of the quality and what they're producing. How quickly is Joe Schmidt able to turn things around for Australia? It's going to be a fascinating one to keep an eye on. Let me know in the comments then, what have we learned? What have we learned about the Springboks, the All Blacks, and the Wallabies? I've run through a few points that stuck out to me. You have your say in the comments. Whilst you're here, like the video and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one.